Welcome to CSA Global. My name is Sam Ulrich. I'm a Principal Consultant in CSA Global's corporate team based in Perth, Australia. This is the fourth in a series of short presentations investigating greenhouse gas emissions in gold mining globally. If you missed the first three presentations, which provide an introduction to greenhouse gas emissions and a detailed look at greenhouse gas emissions in Australia and the world's gold mines, they can be accessed via CSA Global's website and LinkedIn page. The information in this presentation comes from a working project investigating greenhouse gas emissions from gold mines globally. The climate goal of the Paris Agreement is to hold the increase in global average temperatures to well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. To meet this goal, several jurisdictions have introduced a carbon pricing mechanism to change emitters' behaviours into reducing emissions. In 2017, the High-Level Commission on Carbon Prices estimated that a carbon price of $40 to $80 per tonne CO2 was required by 2020 to meet this target, and a carbon price of $50 to $100 per tonne of CO2 was required by 2030. There are three main carbon pricing mechanisms: carbon price, a tax, an emissions trading scheme, ETS, and a cap and trade system. Price on carbon is the most effective method, however, creates socio-economic inequality where low-income households spend a higher proportion of their income on carbon-intensive goods such as electricity and fuel. In this study, I have used a hypothetical $50 US per tonne and $100 US per tonne carbon price. I should note that some of the countries in the study already have an ETS, cap and trade system or price on carbon. However, the systems in place may not necessarily directly affect gold mining due to limitations and exclusions within these systems. To understand how a hypothetical carbon price will affect production costs in different countries, we need a quick recap of the greenhouse gas emissions intensity of gold mining in those countries. Presented here is a greenhouse gas emissions intensity curve of the country weighted average greenhouse gas emissions intensities explained in my previous presentation. Finland has the lowest and South Africa over 20 times greater the highest. Compared to the other countries, Australia is at the higher end of the emissions intensity curve with a weighted average emissions intensity of 637 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce. Canada's average is 261 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce, whereas South Africa's average is over 1,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce higher than Australia's highest greenhouse gas emissions intensity mine. For China, the world's largest gold producer, there was no individual greenhouse gas emissions data available at the time. Based on a life cycle assessment study, an emissions intensity was derived of 1,220 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per ounce, placing it between Mauritania and Greece, numbers 32 and 33 on the emissions intensity curve. The primary reason for the difference between countries is the source of the country's energy. Countries with access to low emissions energy versus those with high emissions energy dominated by fossil fuels. Here are the 2018 country-weighted average all-in sustaining costs in US dollars per ounce for those countries presented as a cost curve. Turkey has the lowest average all-in sustaining cost of 635 US dollars per ounce, and Mauritania the highest, 1,363 US dollars per ounce. Australia's weighted average all-in sustaining cost is 889 US dollars per ounce, which is at the lower end, with Canada and South Africa at the higher end of the cost curve. China's weighted average all-in sustaining cost is 883 US dollars per ounce, which would place it between numbers 12 and 13, Egypt and Peru respectively. It should be noted that the average all-in sustaining cost is based on less than 20% of China's gold production, so is not necessarily a very robust number, unlike most other countries in this study. Here shown on the previous cost curve is the impact of a hypothetical $100 US per tonne carbon price in red is the additional cost imposed in US dollars per ounce. There is now a bit of variation up and downs in the country's costs, with them no longer continuously ascending to the right, meaning that the country's positions would change on a cost curve, including the impact of the carbon price. For example, Australia would move towards the right, higher cost, and Canada would move to the left, lower cost. Essentially, the imposition of a carbon price either increases or decreases a country's competitive price advantage it may have with another country. South Africa, being both high cost and having a high greenhouse gas emissions intensity, would become the world's highest cost gold producer by quite a margin over other countries. Presently not an issue with the current gold price around US $1,800 per ounce. However, if it drops to say US $1,600 per ounce, it would threaten the viability of the gold mining industry without measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Another way to view the impact of a hypothetical carbon price is geographically. The blue bar is the impact of the US $50 per tonne carbon price, and the red bar a US $100 per tonne carbon price. Of the world's top 5 producing countries, Canada has the least impact from a carbon price, followed by the USA, Australia, Russia, and it is estimated China has the highest. This, like the greenhouse gas emissions intensity, is directly related back to energy sources used at the gold mines in those countries. South Africa suffers the most impact from the imposition of a hypothetical carbon price. We can look at the change in competitive advantage quite simply: which countries are winners and which are losers, and who stays the same. Here we are looking at the percentile change up or down the original country weighted average cost curve. Canada is the only larger gold producing country that gets an improvement in its competitive cost advantage. Russia, Australia, and the USA all have a reduction in their competitiveness with respect to costs. An estimate was made for China which showed that based on its position on the greenhouse gas emissions intensity and country-weighted average cost curves, that it would have the largest decrease in competitive cost advantage in the order of 47%. It will be important for gold miners to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, i.e. their greenhouse gas emissions intensity, therefore decreasing the potential impact a carbon price would have on their operations. Gold being an important and top 5 export for many countries, remaining competitive cost-wise will be important for these countries in socio-economic terms. Stay tuned for the final presentation in the series, where I look at the methods companies are using to abate their greenhouse gas emissions and heading towards a greener future for gold mining. Contact marketing@csaglobal.com if you would like more information on this presentation or the paper on greenhouse gas emissions in Australian gold mines. Visit CSA Global's website for this and other presentations. Thank you for listening.